15,000 years ago, you're standing 3 feet from an animal that could kill your children in their sleep. Sharp teeth. Pack hunter. Faster than you. Stronger than you. And somehow, you decide to feed it. Not once. Not by accident. For generations. Every single rule of survival says walk away from the wolf. And yet somewhere, some group of starving Ice Age humans looked at the most dangerous predator on the continent and made a different choice. They kept it close. That decision eventually built the modern dog. But it might also explain something much bigger about how humans conquered the planet. So why would anyone do that on purpose? Let's be clear about what a wolf actually was to an Ice Age human, because it was not a pet. Wolves hunted the exact same animals humans hunted. Deer, bison, wild horses. They moved in packs of 6 to 10, they could smell a person from over a mile away, and a hungry pack could strip a carcass to bone in under an hour. If you were a hunter-gatherer 20,000 years ago, a wolf wasn't a companion. A wolf was direct competition for your next meal, and on a bad day, it was your next meal's competition for you. So here's the actual mystery archaeologists have been arguing about for decades. At some point, in some place, that relationship flipped completely. Instead of two species trying to kill each other over the same shrinking food supply, they ended up sleeping in the same camp. What could possibly make an apex predator and a slow, clawless primate decide to trust each other? Let's start with what we can actually prove happened. In 1914, near Bonn, Germany, archaeologists opened a grave at a site called Bonn Oberkassel. Inside were 2 human skeletons, and resting at their feet, the skeleton of a small dog. Later dating put the burial at roughly 14,200 years old, making it one of the oldest confirmed dog burials on the planet. Here's the part that changes the whole story. When researchers examined that dog's teeth and bones decades later, they found it had suffered from canine distemper, a brutal viral disease that kills most wild wolves within weeks. This puppy had gone through periods of severe illness that would have left it unable to walk or hunt, completely helpless, for months at a time. It survived anyway. Someone fed and nursed a sick, useless animal that could give them nothing back, through repeated bouts of a disease that kills most dogs in under 3 weeks without care. The puppy eventually died anyway, at around 6 or 7 months old. But instead of discarding the body the way any Ice Age group would discard a dead animal, they buried it next to 2 humans. Like family. That's not a hunting tool. That's not a guard dog. So what exactly is that? And it might go back even further than Bonn Oberkassel. In a cave in the Altai Mountains of Siberia, called Razboynikia Cave, researchers found a skull that looked wrong for a wolf, but wrong for a dog too. A shortened snout. Crowded teeth. Something caught in between. Dating put it at roughly 33,000 years old. If that skull really does represent an animal on the path toward domestication, it means humans were experimenting with wolves almost 20,000 years before that grave in Germany. Deep in the last Ice Age. Before agriculture. Before permanent villages. Before almost anything we associate with civilization. Not every scientist agrees that Skull was a true domesticate rather than just an unusual wolf. But the argument itself tells you something important. Wherever this actually started, it's older and stranger than anyone expected. So if nobody planned this, how did it even begin? And there's another twist that DNA has only recently revealed. In 2016, a team of geneticists led by Laurent France published ancient DNA evidence in the journal Science suggesting dogs might have been domesticated not once, but twice, completely independently. Once somewhere in Western Eurasia. Once somewhere in Eastern Asia. 2 separate groups of humans, thousands of miles apart, apparently ran the exact same experiment on the exact same species without ever knowing the other one existed. A larger 2020 study in Science pushed the picture even further, using genomes pulled from ancient dog bones across Europe and Asia. It found that by roughly 11,000 years ago, dogs had already split into at least 5 major genetic lineages, spread from the Near East all the way to Siberia. Whatever happened between humans and wolves wasn't one event in one place. It was happening in parallel, among people who had never met each other, who somehow reached the exact same conclusion. Two completely separate human populations, staring at the same terrifying predator, arrived at the same decision. Coincidence? Or is there something deeper going on? The leading theory today isn't that some genius Ice Age human sat down and decided to raise wolf puppies on purpose. It's that the wolves basically domesticated themselves. Picture a hunter-gatherer camp. Every few days, there's a pile of bones and scraps sitting at the edge of it. Free calories, completely unguarded. Most wolves in a pack are too wired for danger to go anywhere near strange, upright, fire-using primates. But not every wolf has the same temperament. In any wolf population, a handful of individuals are just a little less fearful, a little calmer around something unfamiliar. Those slightly bolder wolves were the ones willing to creep toward the edge of a human camp and eat the garbage nobody else would touch. And because scavenging scraps takes far less energy than chasing down a bison, those particular animals had a real advantage. They survived winters better. They had more pups. And their pups inherited that exact same low-fear temperament. Generation after generation, natural selection wasn't picking the strongest wolf, or even the smartest one. It was quietly picking the calmest one. And once a whole cluster of wolves is hanging around your camp every single night, watching you, smelling like your fires, sleeping close enough to hear you breathe, what do you think happens next? We actually have direct proof this exact kind of selection works, and it comes from one of the strangest experiments in scientific history. In 1959, a Soviet geneticist named Dmitry Belyaev started breeding silver foxes on a farm in Siberia. His rule was brutally simple. Every generation, only the calmest, least aggressive foxes were allowed to breed with each other. Nothing else mattered. Not size. Not color. Just tameness. Within 8 to 10 generations, something bizarre started happening. The foxes weren't just calmer around people. Their ears started flopping instead of standing up straight. Their tails began to curl. Patches of white fur appeared on their coats out of nowhere. Some of them even started barking. Nobody bred for any of that on purpose. Belyaev was only selecting for one single trait, a lack of fear. But it turns out the genes controlling fear and aggression are wired into the exact same developmental pathways that control ear cartilage and coat color. Select for tameness, and floppy ears and curly tails come along completely for free. Which means the transformation from wolf to dog might not have needed thousands of years of careful human breeding at all. It might have just needed wolves willing to sit a little closer to the fire. But being calm enough to scavenge scraps is one thing. Why would humans go from simply tolerating these animals to actually protecting them? Because once a few wolves were hanging around permanently, hunter-gatherers figured out something valuable fast. These animals could smell a predator, or a rival group, approaching long before any human ever could. A camp with wolves sleeping at its edge had a built-in alarm system that never needed to sleep itself. Then there's the hunt. Wolves and early humans were both pursuit hunters by nature. A dog can chase down a wounded animal and hold it at bay just long enough for a hunter with a spear to close the distance and finish the job. Some researchers argue that human canine hunting teams could bring down large, dangerous prey at a scale that gave certain groups a real competitive edge over neighboring bands who didn't have dogs at all. And then there's the simplest reason of all. An Ice Age night gets brutally cold, and a warm, breathing body curled against yours doesn't need to be human to keep you alive until morning. An early warning system. A hunting partner. A heater that also happens to love you. Once a group had all three, why would they ever let that animal go? But none of this makes it sound like the actual gamble it was. Keeping a wolf close wasn't guaranteed to work out. These were still wild animals with a bite force that could crush bone, and one bad winter, one season where food ran short, could turn a sleeping companion into the thing that kills you in your sleep instead. There's also a colder danger most people never think about. Wolves and dogs can carry rabies, and for most of human history, a bite like that was a death sentence with no cure at all. Every group that let wolves stay close was quietly accepting that risk, generation after generation, without knowing what a virus even was. And it's worth remembering that humans tried this with other animals too. Foxes, hyenas, wild cats. Almost none of those relationships stuck the way it did with wolves. Something about this one particular predator, its pack structure, its social wiring, made it uniquely willing to bend toward us in a way almost nothing else in the Ice Age world ever did. So out of every dangerous animal sharing that landscape, why did this one, and only this one, actually work? So somewhere between 33,000 and 14,000 years ago, on the edge of survival, in the cold, a version of this story happened over and over. Different places, different wolves, different humans. Until an entire predator species had quietly rewired itself to live alongside ours. Nobody planned it. Nobody sat down one day and invented the dog. It was thousands of small, unremarkable choices, repeated across thousands of years. Don't chase that wolf off tonight. Feed the sick puppy instead of leaving it to die. Let the calm one stay a little closer to the fire. And because of those choices, right now, on every continent on Earth, there is very likely a dog sleeping a few feet from a human, trusting them completely. That dog is a direct, living descendant of the exact same wolves who might have killed your ancestors if your ancestors hadn't decided, against every survival instinct they had, that this one predator was worth keeping alive. We didn't just tame the wolf. Somewhere in that process, something in us changed too.